Chapter 4.53. How by the virtue of the decretals, gold is subtly drawn out of France to Rome. I would, said Epistemon, it had cost me a pint of the best tripe that ever can enter into gut, so we had but compared with the original the dreadful chapters, execrabiles de multa, si plures, de anities pertatum, nisi essent, cum ad monasterium, quad delectio, mandatum, and certain others that draw every year out of France to Rome 400,000 ducats and more. Do you make nothing of this? Asked Homnes. Though methinks, after all, it is but little if we consider that France, the most Christian, is the only nurse the See of Rome has. However, find me in the whole world a book, whether of philosophy, physic, law, mathematics, or other humane learning, nay, even, by my God, of the Holy Scripture itself, will draw as much money thence. None pisha tush blurt pish, none can. You may look till your eyes drop out of your head, nay, till doomsday in the afternoon, before you can find another of that energy. I'll pass my word for that. Yet these devilish heretics refuse to learn and know it. Burn M, tear M, nip M with hot pincers, drown M, hang M, spit M at the bunghole, pelt M, pout M, bruise M, beat M, cripple M, dismember M, cut M, gut M, bowel M, paunch M, thrash M, slash M, gash M, chop M, slice M, slit M, carve M, saw M, bethweck M, pare M, hack M, hew M, mince M, flay M, boil M, broil M, roast M, toast M, bake M, fry M, crucify M, crush M, squeeze M, grind M. Batter M, burst M, quarter M, unlimb M, behump M, bethump M, belam M, belabor M, pepper M, spitchcock M, and carbonade M on gridirons, these wicked heretics. Decretalifuges, decretalicides, worse than homicides, worse than patricides, decretalictones of the devil of hell. As for you other good people, I must earnestly pray and beseech you to believe no other thing, to think on, say, undertake, or do no other thing, than what's contained in our sacred decretals and their corollaries, this fine sextum, these fine clementini, these fine extravagance. O deific books! So shall you enjoy glory, honor, exaltation, wealth, dignities, and preferments in this world, be revered and dreaded by all, preferred, elected, and chosen above all men. For there is not under the cope of heaven a condition of men, out of which you'll find persons fitter to do and handle all things than those who by divine prescience, eternal predestination, have applied themselves to the study of the holy decretals. Would you choose a worthy emperor, a good captain, a fit general in time of war, one that can well foresee all inconveniences, avoid all dangers, briskly and bravely bring his men on to a breach or attack, still be on sure grounds, always overcome without loss of his men, and know how to make a good use of his victory? Take me a decretist. No, I mean a decretalist. Ho, the foul blunder, whispered Epistemon. Would you, in time of peace, find a man capable of wisely governing the state of a commonwealth, of a kingdom, of an empire, of a monarchy, sufficient to maintain the clergy, nobility, senate, and commons in wealth, friendship, unity, obedience, virtue, and honesty? Take a decretalist. Would you find a man who, by his exemplary life, eloquence, and pious admonitions, may in a short time, without effusion of human blood, conquer the Holy Land and bring over to the Holy Church the misbelieving Turks, Jews, Tartars, Muscovites, Mamelukes, and Sarabonites? Take me a decretalist. What makes in many countries the people rebellious and depraved, pages saucy and mischievous, students sottish and dunsical? Nothing but that their governors and tutors were not decretalists. But what, on your conscience, was it, do you think, that established, confirmed, and authorized those fine religious orders with whom you see the Christian world everywhere adorned, graced, and illustrated, as the firmament is with its glorious stars? The holy decretals. What was it that founded, underpropped, and fixed, and now maintains, nourishes, and feeds the devout monks and friars in convents, monasteries, and abbeys? So that did they not daily and mightily pray without ceasing, the world would be in evident danger of returning to its primitive chaos. The sacred decretals. What makes and daily increases the famous and celebrated patrimony of Saint Peter, in plenty of all temporal, corporeal, and spiritual blessings? The holy decretals. What made the Holy Apostolic See and Pope of Rome in all times, and at this present, so dreadful in the universe, that all kings, emperors, potentates, and lords, willing, nilling, must depend upon him, hold of him, be crowned, confirmed, and authorized by him, come thither to strike sail, buckle, and fall down before his holy slipper, whose picture you have seen. The mighty decretals of God. I will discover you a great secret. The universities of your world have commonly a book, either open or shut, in their arms and devices. What book do you think it is? Truly, I do not know, answered Pantagruel. I never read it. It is the decretals, said Homnes, without which the privileges of all universities would soon be lost. You must own that I have taught you this. Ha 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 ha. Here Homnes began to belch, to fart, to funk, to laugh, to slaver, and to sweat. And then he gave his huge, greasy, four-cornered cap to one of the lasses, who clapped it on her pretty head with a great deal of joy, after she had lovingly bussed it, as a sure token that she should be first married. Vivat, cried Epistemon, fifat, bibat, pipet. O apocalyptic secret! Continued Homnes, light, light, clerica, light here with double lanterns. Now for the fruit, virgins. I was saying then, that giving yourselves thus wholly to the study of the holy decretals, you will gain wealth and honor in this world. I add, that in the next you will infallibly be saved in the blessed kingdom of heaven, whose keys are given to our good God and decretaliarch. O my good God, whom I adore and never saw by thy special grace open unto us, at the point of death at least, this most sacred treasure of our holy Mother Church, whose protector, preserver, butler, chief larder, administrator, and disposer thou art. And take care, I beseech thee, O Lord, that the precious works of supererogation, the goodly pardons, do not fail us in time of need, so that the devils may not find an opportunity to gripe our precious souls, and the dreadful jaws of hell may not swallow us. If we must pass through purgatory, thy will be done. It is in thy power to draw us out of it when thou pleasest. Here Homnes began to shed huge hot briny tears, to beat his breast, and kiss his thumbs in the shape of a cross. Chapter 4.54. How Homnes gave Pantagruel some bon Christian pears. Epistemon, Friar John, and Panurge, seeing this doleful catastrophe, began, under the cover of their napkins, to cry mio, 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 feigning to wipe their eyes all the while as if they had wept. The wenches were doubly diligent, and brought brimmers of clementine wine to every one, besides store of sweetmeats, and thus the feasting was revived. Before we arose from table, Homnes gave us a great quantity of fair large pears, saying, Here, my good friends, these are singular good pears. You will find none such anywhere else, I dare warrant. Every soil bears not everything, you know. India alone boasts black ebony, the best incense is produced in Sabia, the esfragited earth at Lemnos, so this island is the only place where such fine pears grow. You may, if you please, make seminaries with their pippins in your country. I like their taste extremely, said Pantagruel. If they were sliced, and put into a pan on the fire with wine and sugar, I fancy they would be very wholesome meat for the sick, as well as for the healthy. Pray, what do you call M? No otherwise than you have heard, replied Homnes. We are a plain downright sort of people, as God would have it, and call figs, figs, plums, plums, and pears, pears. Truly, said Pantagruel, if I live to go home, which I hope will be speedily, God willing, I'll set off and graft some in my garden in Touraine, by the banks of the Loire, and will call them bon Christian or good Christian pears, for I never saw better Christians than are these good Papamons. I would like him 2 to 1 better yet, said Friar John, would he but give us 2 or 3 cartloads of yon buxom lasses. Why, what would you do with them? Cried Homnes. Quoth Friar John, no harm, only bleed the kind-hearted souls straight between the 2 great toes with certain clever lancets of the right stamp, by which operation good Christian children would be inoculated upon them, and the breed be multiplied in our country, in which there are not many overgood, the more's the pity. Nay, verily, replied Homnes, we cannot do this, for you would make them tread their shoes awry, crack their pipkins, and spoil their shapes. You love mutton, I see, you will run at sheep. I know you by that same nose and hair of yours, though I never saw your face before. Alas! Alas! How kind you are! And would you indeed damn your precious soul? Our decretals forbid this. Ah, I wish you had them at your finger's end. Patience, said Friar John, but si tu non vis dare presta quisumus. Matter of breviary. As for that, I defy all the world, and I fear no man that wears a head and a hood, though he were a crystalline, I mean a decretaline doctor. Dinner being over, we took our leave of the Right Reverend Homnes, and of all the good people, humbly giving thanks. And, to make them amends for their kind entertainment, promised them that, at our coming to Rome, we would make our applications so effectually to the Pope that he would speedily be sure to come to visit them in person. After this, we went aboard. Pantagruel, by an act of generosity, and as an acknowledgment of the sight of the Pope's picture, gave Homnes 9 pieces of double-friezed cloth of gold to be set before the grates of the window. He also caused the church box for its repairs and fabric to be quite filled with double crowns of gold, and ordered 914 angels to be delivered to each of the lasses who had waited at table, to buy them husbands when they could get them. Chapter 4.55. How Pantagruel, being at sea, heard various unfrozen words. When we were at sea, junketing, tippling, discoursing, and telling stories, Pantagruel rose and stood up to look out, then asked us, "Do you hear nothing, gentlemen? Methinks I hear some people talking in the air, yet I can see nobody." Hark! According to his command, we listened, and with full ears sucked in the air as some of you suck oysters, to find if we could hear some sound scattered through the sky. And to lose none of it, like the Emperor Antoninus, some of us laid their hands hollow next to their ears. But all this would not do, nor could we hear any voice. Yet Pantagruel continued to assure us he heard various voices in the air, some of men and some of women. At last we began to fancy that we also heard something, or at least that our ears tingled. And the more we listened, the plainer we discerned the voices, so as to distinguish articulate sounds. This mightily frightened us, and not without cause, since we could see nothing, yet heard such various sounds and voices of men, women, children, horses, and sea, insomuch that Panurge cried out, "Cod's belly, there is no fooling with the devil, we are all beshit, let's fly. There is some ambuscado hereabouts. Friar John, art thou here, my love? I pray thee, stay by me, old boy. Hast thou got thy swinging tool? See that it do not stick in thy scabbard, thou never scourest it half as it should be. We are undone. Hark! They are guns, gad judge me. Let's fly, I do not say with hands and feet, as Brutus said at the battle of Pharsalia. I say, with sails and oars. Let's whip it away. I never find myself to have a bit of courage at sea. In cellars and elsewhere I have more than enough. Let's fly and save our bacon. I do not say this for any fear that I have, for I dread nothing but danger that I don't. I always say it that shouldn't. The free archer of Bainalet said as much. Let us hazard nothing, therefore, I say, lest we come off bluely. Tack about, helm a lee, thou son of a bachelor. Would I were now well in quinquinize, though I were never to marry. Haste away, let's make all the sail we can. They'll be too hard for us, we are not able to cope with them, they are 10 to our 1, I'll warrant you. Nay, and they are on their dunghill, while we do not know the country. They will be the death of us. We'll lose no honor by flying. Demosthenes saith, that the man that runs away may fight another day. At least let us retreat to the leeward. Helm alee, bring the main tack aboard, haul the bowlines, hoist the top gallants. We are all dead men, get off, in the devil's name, get off. Pantagruel, hearing the sad outcry which Panurge made, said, Who talks of flying? Let's first see who they are, perhaps they may be friends. I can discover nobody yet, though I can see 100 miles round me. But let's consider a little. I have read that a philosopher named Petron was of opinion that there were several worlds that touched each other in an equilateral triangle, in whose center, he said, was the dwelling of truth, and that the words, ideas, copies, and images of all things past and to come resided there, round which was the age, and that with successive time part of them used to fall on mankind like rheums and mildews, just as the dew fell on Gideon's fleece, till the age was fulfilled. I also remember, continued he, that Aristotle affirms Homer's words to be flying, moving, and consequently animated. Besides, Antiphanes said that Plato's philosophy was like words which, being spoken in some country during a hard winter, are immediately congealed, frozen up, and not heard, for what Plato taught young lads could hardly be understood by them when they were grown old. Now, continued he, we should philosophize and search whether this be not the place where those words are thawed. You would wonder very much, should this be the head and lyre of Orpheus? When the Thracian women had torn him to pieces, they threw his head and lyre into the river Hebrus, down which they floated to the Euxine Sea as far as the island of Lesbos, the head continually uttering a doleful song, as it were lamenting the death of Orpheus, and the lyre, with the wind's impulse moving its strings and harmoniously accompanying the voice. Let's see if we cannot discover them hereabouts. Chapter 4.56. How among the frozen words Pantagruel found some odd ones. The skipper made answer, "Be not afraid, my lord, we are on the confines of the frozen sea, on which, about the beginning of last winter, happened a great and bloody fight between the Arimaspians and the Nephelibates. Then the words and cries of men and women, the hacking, slashing, and hewing of battle-axes, the shocking, knocking, and jolting of armors and harnesses, the neighing of horses, and all other martial din and noise, froze in the air. And now, the rigor of the winter being over, by the succeeding serenity and warmth of the weather they melt and are heard." "By Jingo," quoth Panurge, "the man talks somewhat like." "I believe him. But couldn't we see some of M? I think I have read that, on the edge of the mountain on which Moses received the Judaic law, the people saw the voices sensibly." "Here, here," said Pantagruel, "here are some that are not yet thawed." He then threw us on the deck whole handfuls of frozen words, which seemed to us like your rough sugar plums, of many colors like those used in heraldry. Some words gules, this means also jests and merry sayings. Some vert, some azure, some black, some or this means also fair words. And when we had somewhat warmed them between our hands, they melted like snow, and we really heard them but could not understand them, for it was a barbarous gibberish. One of them only, that was pretty big, having been warmed between Friar John's hands, gave a sound much like that of chestnuts when they are thrown into the fire without being first cut, which made us all start. This was the report of a field piece in its time, cried Friar John. Panurge prayed Pantagruel to give him some more, but Pantagruel told him that to give words was the part of a lover. "Sell me some then, I pray you," cried Panurge. "That's the part of a lawyer," returned Pantagruel. "I would sooner sell you silence, though at a dearer rate, as Demosthenes formerly sold it by the means of his Argentangina or silver squinsy." However, he threw 3 or 4 handfuls of them on the deck, among which perceived some very sharp words and some bloody words, which the pilot said used sometimes to go back and recoil to the place whence they came, but it was with a slit weasand. We also saw some terrible words, and some others not very pleasant to the eye. When they had been all melted together, we heard a strange noise, hin, 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 his, tick, tock, tock, bredelin, brededek, frr, 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 boo, 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 track, track, trr, 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 trrr, trrrrrrr. On, ow, owen, gog, magog, and I do not know what other barbarous words, which the pilot said were the noise made by the charging squadrons, the shock and neighing of horses. Then we heard some large ones go off like drums and fifes, and others like clarions and trumpets. Believe me, we had very good sport with them. I would fain have saved some merry odd words, and have preserved them in oil, as ice and snow are kept, and between clean straw. But Pantagruel would not let me, saying that 'tis a folly to hoard up what we are never like to want or have always at hand, odd, quaint, merry, and fat words of gules never being scarce among all good and jovial Pantagruelists. Panurge somewhat vexed Friar John, and put him in the pouts, for he took him at his word while he dreamed of nothing less. This caused the friar to threaten him with such a piece of revenge as was put upon G. Jousome, who having taken the merry Patelin at his word when he had overbid himself in some cloth, was afterwards fairly taken by the horns like a bullock by his jovial chapman, whom he took at his word like a man. Panurge, well knowing that threatened folks live long, bobbed and made mouths at him in token of derision, then cried, "Would I had here the word of the holy bottle, without being thus obliged to go further in pilgrimage to her." Chapter 4.57. How Pantagruel went ashore at the dwelling of Gaster, the first master of arts in the world. That day Pantagruel went ashore in an island which, for situation and governor, may be said not to have its fellow. When you just come into it, You find it rugged, craggy, and barren, unpleasant to the eye, painful to the feet, and almost as inaccessible as the mountain of Dauphin, which is somewhat like a toadstool, and was never climbed as any can remember by any but Doyac, who had the charge of King Charles VIII's train of artillery. This same Doyac with strange tools and engines gained that mountain's top, and there he found an old ram. It puzzled many a wise head to guess how it got thither. Some said that some eagle or great horncoot, having carried it thither while it was yet a lambkin, it had got away and saved itself among the bushes. As for us, having with much toil and sweat overcome the difficult ways at the entrance, we found the top of the mountains so fertile, healthful, and pleasant that I thought I was then in the true Garden of Eden or earthly paradise, about whose situation our good theologues are in such a quandary and keep such a pother. As for Pantagruel, he said that here was the seat of Arete, that is as much as to say, virtue described by Hesiod. This, however, with submission to better judgments. The ruler of this place was one Master Gaster, the first master of arts in this world. For if you believe that fire is the great master of arts, as Tully writes, you very much wrong him and yourself, alas. Tully never believed this. On the other side, if you fancy Mercury to be the first inventor of arts, as our ancient Druids believed of old, you are mightily beside the mark. The satirist's sentence, that affirms Master Gaster to be the master of all arts, is true. With him peacefully recited old Goody Penia, alias Poverty, the mother of the 99 Muses, on whom Porus, the Lord of Plenty, formerly begot Love, that noble child, the mediator of heaven and earth, as Plato affirms in Symposio. We were all obliged to pay our homage and swear allegiance to that mighty sovereign, for he is imperious, severe, blunt, hard, uneasy, inflexible. You cannot make him believe, represent to him, or persuade him anything. He does not hear, and as the Egyptians said that Harpocrates, the god of silence, named Sigalion in Greek, was a stone, that is, without a mouth, so Gaster was created without ears, even like the image of Jupiter in Candia. He only speaks by signs, but those signs are more readily obeyed by everyone than the statutes of senates or commands of monarchs. Neither will he admit the least letter delay in his summons. You say that when a lion roars, all the beasts at a considerable distance round about, as far as his roar can be heard, are seized with a shivering. This is written, it is true, I have seen it. I assure you that at Master Gaster's command the very heavens tremble, and all the earth shakes. His command is called, do this or die. Needs must when the devil drives, there's no gainsaying of it. The pilot was telling us how, on a certain time, after the manner of the members that mutinied against the belly, as Aesop describes it, the whole kingdom of the Psalmates went off into a direct faction against Gaster, resolving to throw off his yoke. But they soon found their mistake, and most humbly submitted, for otherwise they had all been famished. What company soever he is in, none dispute with him for precedence or superiority. He still goes first, though kings, emperors, or even the Pope were there. So he held the first place at the Council of Baal, though some will tell you that the council was tumultuous by the contention and ambition of many for priority. Everyone is busied and labors to serve him, and indeed, to make amends for this, he does this good to mankind, as to invent for them all arts, machines, trades, engines, and crafts. He even instructs brutes in arts which are against their nature, making poets of ravens, jackdaws, chattering jays, parrots, and starlings, and poetesses of magpies, teaching them to utter human language, speak, and sing, and all for the gut. He reclaims and tames eagles, gerfalcons, falcons gentle, sakers, lanners, goshawks, sparrowhawks, merlins, haggards, passengers, wild rapacious birds, so that, setting them free in the air whenever he thinks fit, as high and as long as he pleases, he keeps them suspended, straying, flying, hovering, and courting him above the clouds. Then on a sudden he makes them stoop, and come down aiming from heaven next to the ground, and all for the gut. Elephants, lions, rhinoceroses, bears, horses, mares, and dogs, he teaches to dance, prance, vault, fight, swim, hide themselves, fetch and carry what he pleases, and all for the gut. Salt and freshwater fish, whales, and the monsters of the main, he brings them up from the bottom of the deep. Wolves he forces out of the woods, bears out of the rocks, foxes out of their holes, and serpents out of the ground, and all for the gut. In short, he is so unruly that in his rage he devours all men and beasts, as was seen among the Vascans when Q. Metellus besieged them in the Sertorian Wars, among the Saguntines besieged by Hannibal, among the Jews besieged by the Romans, and 600 more, and all for the gut. When his regent Penia takes a progress, wherever she moves all senates are shut up, all statutes repealed, all orders and proclamations vain. She knows, obeys, and has no law. All shun her, in every place choosing rather to expose themselves to shipwreck at sea, and venture through fire, rocks, caves, and precipices, than be seized by that most dreadful tormentor. Chapter 4.58. How, at the court of the master of ingenuity, Pantagruel detested the Angastromides and the gastrolators. At the court of that great master of ingenuity, Pantagruel observed two sorts of troublesome and two officious apparitors, whom he very much detested. The first were called Angastromides, the others gastrolators. The first pretended to be descended of the ancient race of Euricles, and for this brought the authority of Aristophanes in his comedy called The Wasps, whence of old they were called Eurycleans, as Plato writes, and Plutarch in his book of the Cessation of Oracles. In the Holy Decrees, 26:3, they are styled ventriloqui, and the same name is given them in Ionian by Hippocrates in his 5th book of Epid, as men who speak from the belly. Sophocles calls them sternamontes. These were soothsayers, enchanters, cheats, who gulled the mob and seemed not to speak and give answers from the mouth, but from the belly. Such a one, about the year of our Lord 1513, was Jacoba Rotagina, an Italian woman of mean extract, from whose belly we, as well as an infinite number of others at Ferrara and elsewhere, have often heard the voice of the evil spirit speak, low, feeble, and small indeed, but yet very distinct, articulate, and intelligible, when she was sent for out of curiosity by the lords and princes of the Cisalpine Gaul. To remove all manner of doubt, and be assured that this was not a trick, they used to have her stripped stark naked, and caused her mouth and nose to be stopped. This evil spirit would be called curled pate or cincinnatulo, seeming pleased when any called him by that name, at which he was always ready to answer. If any spoke to him of things past or present, he gave pertinent answers, sometimes to the amazement of the hearers. But if of things to come, then the devil was gravelled, and used to lie as fast as a dog can trot. Nay, sometimes he seemed to own his ignorance, instead of an answer letting out a rousing fart, or muttering some words with barbarous and uncouth inflections, and not to be understood. As for the gastrolators, they stuck close to one another in knots and gangs. Some of them merry, wanton, and soft as so many milksops, others leering, grim, dogged, demure, and crabbed, all idle, mortal foes to business, spending half their time in sleeping and the rest in doing nothing, a rent charge and dead unnecessary weight on the earth, as Hesiod saith, afraid, as we judged, of offending or lessening their paunch. Others were masked, disguised, and so oddly dressed that it would have done you good to have seen them. There's a saying, and several ancient sages write, that the skill of nature appears wonderful in the pleasure which she seems to have taken in the configuration of seashells. So great is their variety in figures, colors, streaks, and inimitable shapes. I protest the variety we perceived, in the dresses of the gastrolatrous Coquelins, was not less. They all owned Gaster for their supreme god, adored him as a god, offered him sacrifices as to their omnipotent deity, owned no other god, served, loved, and honored him above all things. You would have thought that the holy apostle spoke of those when he said, Phil. Chapter 3, Many walk, of whom I have told you often, and now tell you even weeping, that they are enemies of the cross of Christ, whose end is destruction, whose god is their belly. Pantagruel compared them to the Cyclops Polyphemus, whom Euripides brings in speaking thus, I only sacrifice to myself not to the god's end, to this belly of mine, the greatest of all the gods. Chapter 4.59. Of the ridiculous statue Manjus, and how and what the gastrolators sacrificed to their ventripotent god. While we fed our eyes with the sight of the phizzes and actions of these lounging, gully-gutted gastrolators, we on a sudden heard the sound of a musical instrument called a bell, at which all of them placed themselves in rank and file as for some mighty battle, everyone according to his office, degree, and seniority. In this order they moved towards Master Gaster, after a plump, young, lusty, gorbelid fellow, who on a long staff fairly gilt carried a wooden statue, grossly carved, and as scurvily daubed over with paint. Such a one as Plautus, Juvenal, and Pomp. Festas describe it. At Lyon during the carnival it is called mashicrout or knockrust. They called this man-juice. It was a monstrous, ridiculous, hideous figure, fit to fright little children. Its eyes were bigger than its belly, and its head larger than all the rest of its body. Well mouth-cloven, however, having a goodly pair of wide, broad jaws lined with 2 rows of teeth, upper tier and under tier, which, by the magic of a small twine hid in the hollow part of the golden staff, were made to clash, clatter, and rattle dreadfully one against another, as they do at Metz with St. Clement's dragon. Coming near the gastrolators, I saw they were followed by a great number of fat waiters and tenders, laden with baskets, dossers, hampers, dishes, wallets, pots, and kettles. Then, under the conduct of man-juice, and singing I do not know what dithyrambics, crepulocums, and eponyms, opening their baskets and pots, they offered their god. White hippocras, fricassees, 9 cold loins of veal, with dry toasts. Sorts. With spice. White bread. Monastical brewies. Zinzaburine. Brown bread. Gravy soup. Beadle pies. Carbonados, 6 hotchpots. Brewies. Sorts. Soft bread. Marrowbones toast brawn. Household bread. And cabbage. Sweetbreads. Capirotados. Hashes. Eternal drink intermixed. Brisk delicate white wine led the van. Claret and champagne followed, cool, nay, as cold as the very ice, I say, filled and offered in large silver cups. Then they offered chitlins, garchines, and peas. Hams, nished with mews-hogs' haslets. Brawn heads. Tard. Scotch collops. Powdered venison sausages. Puddings. With turnips. Neat's tongues. Servalats. Pickled olives. Hung beef. Bologna sausages. All this associated with sempiternal liquor. Then they housed within his muzzle legs of mutton with ribs of pork with caponets. Shallots. Onion sauce. Caviar and toast. Olias. Roast capons, basted fawns, deer. Lumber pies with their own hairs, leverets. Hot sauce. Dripping. Plovers. Partridges and young flamingos. Herons and young partridges. Cygnets. Herons. Dwarf herons. A reinforcement of olives. Teals. Vinegar intermixed. Thrushes. Duckers. Venison pasties. Young sea ravens. Bitterns. Lark pies. Geese goslings. Shovelers. Dormice pies. Queests. Curlews. Cabretto pasties. Widgeons. Wood hens. Roebuck pasties. Mavises. Coots with leeks. Pigeon pies. Grouses. Fat kids. Kid pasties. Turtles. Shoulders of mutton, capon pies. Dough conies. With capers. Bacon pies. Hedgehogs. Sirloins of beef. Soused hog's feet. Snits. Breasts of veal. Fried pasty crust. Then large puffs. Pheasants and fee forced capons. Thistle finches. Sunt poots. Parmesan cheese. Whore's farts. Peacocks. Red and pale hip fritters. Storks. Pokras. Cakes 16 sorts. Woodcocks. Gold peaches. Crisp wafers. Snipes. Artichokes. Quince tarts. Ortolans. Dry and wet sweet curds and cream. Turkey cocks, hen meats, 70 whipped cream. Turkeys and turkey 8 sorts. Preserved marabo poots. Boiled hens and fat lambs. Stock doves and capons marinated. Jellies. Wood culvers. Pullets with eggs. Welsh barrapiclids. Pigs with wine sauce. Chickens. Macaroons. Blackbirds, owls, and rabbits, and sucking tarts 20 sorts. Rails. Rabbits. Lemon cream, rasp moorhens. Quails and young berry cream and c. Bustards and bustard quails. Comfits 100 poots. Pigeons, squabs, and colors. Fig peckers. Squeakers. Cream wafers. Young guinea hens. Field fares. Cream cheese. Vinegar brought up the rear to wash the mouth, and for fear of the squinsy, also toasts to scour the grinders. Chapter 4.6. What the gastrolators sacrificed to their god on interlarded fish days. Pantagruel did not like this pack of rascally scoundrels with their manifold kitchen sacrifices, and would have been gone had not Epistemon prevailed with him to stay and see the end of the farce. He then asked the skipper what the idle lobcocks used to sacrifice to their gorbelid god on interlarded fish days. For his first course, said the skipper, they gave him caviar, tops, bishop's gods, red herrings, bitargos, celery, chives, ram pilchards, fresh butter, pions, Jew's ears, anchovies, peas soup, sort of mushrooms, fry of tunny, spinach, that sprout out of cauliflowers, fresh herrings, full old elders, spara beans, road, Gus woodbined salt salmon, salads 100 and a world of pickled grigs, varieties of crez others, oysters in the shell, says sodden hop. Then he must drink, or the devil would gripe him at the throat. This, therefore, they take care to prevent, and nothing is wanting. Which being done, they give him lampreys with hippocras sauce, gurnards, thornbacks, fried oysters, salmon trouts, sleeves, cockles, barbels, grate, and sturgeons, prawns, small, sheath fish, smelts, roaches, mackerels, rockfish, cockerels, maids, gracious lords, minnows, plaice, swordfish, skatefish, sharplings, soles, lampreys, tunnies, mussels, jags, silver eels, lobsters, pickerels, chevins, great prawns, golden carps, crayfish, dace, burbaits, pallors, bleaks, salmons, shrimps, tenches, salmon peels, congers, ombers, dolphins, porpoises, fresh cods, barn trouts, bases, dried melwills, miller's thumbs, shads, darefish, precks, murrens, a sort of fossons and grigs, bretfish, lampreys, eel pouts, flounders, graylings, tortoises, sea nettles, smies, serpents, i.e., wood mullets, turbots, eels, gudgeons, trout not above a dories, dabs and sandings, foot long, moorgame, haddocks, salmons, perches, carps, meagres, loaches, pikes, sea breams, crabfish, batitos, halibuts, snails and whelks, rochets, dog's tongue or kind frogs, sea bears, fool. If, when he had crammed all this down his guttural trapdoor, he did not immediately make the fish swim again in his paunch, death would pack him off in a trice. Special care is taken to antidote his godship with vine-tree syrup. Then is sacrificed to him haberdines, poor Jack, mingle-mangled, mismashed, and c. Eggs fried, beaten, sliced, roasted in green fish. Buttered poached thambers, tossed sea bats. Hardened, boiled in the chimney, and c. Cod sounds. Broiled stewed stockfish. Sea pikes, which to concoct and digest the more easily, vinegar is multiplied. For the latter part of their sacrifices they offer rice milk and hasty stewed prunes and raisins, pudding, baked bullace, dates, buttered wheat and pistachios, or fistic chestnut and wild flummery, nuts, watergruel and figs, filberts, milk porridge, almond butter, parsnips, frumenty and bonny skirret root, artichokes, clamber, white pot, perpetuity of soaking with the whole. It was none of their fault, I will assure you, if this same God of theirs was not publicly, preciously, and plentifully served in the sacrifices, better yet than Heliogabalus's idol. Nay, more than Bel and the dragon in Babylon under King Belshazzar. Yet Gaster had the manners to own that he was no god, but a poor, vile, wretched creature. And as King Antigonus, first of the name, when one Hermodotus, as poets will flatter, especially princes in some of his fustian dubbed him a god, and made the son adopt him for his son, said to him, "My Lasinophor, or in plain English, my groom of the close stool, can give thee the lie." So Master Gaster very civilly used to send back his bigoted worshippers to his close stool, to see, smell, taste, philosophize, and examine what kind of divinity they could pick out of his Sir Reverence. Chapter 4.61. How Gaster invented means to get and preserve corn. Those gastrolatrous hobgoblins being withdrawn, Pantagruel carefully minded the famous master of arts, Gaster. You know that, by the institution of nature, bread has been assigned him for provision and food, and that, as an addition to this blessing, he should never want the means to get bread. Accordingly, from the beginning he invented the smith's art, and husbandry to manure the ground, that it might yield him corn. He invented arms and the art of war to defend corn, physic and astronomy, with other parts of mathematics which might be useful to keep corn a great number of years in safety from the injuries of the air, beasts, robbers, and purloiners. He invented water, wind, and handmills, and 1,000 other engines to grind corn and to turn it into meal. Leaven to make the dough ferment, and the use of salt to give it a savor. For he knew that nothing bred more diseases than heavy, unleavened, unsavory bread. He found a way to get fire to bake it, hour glasses, dials, and clocks to mark the time of its baking. And as some countries wanted corn, he contrived means to convey some out of one country into another. He had the wit to pimp for asses and mares, animals of different species, that they might copulate for the generation of a third, which we call mules, more strong and fit for hard service than the other two. He invented carts and wagons to draw him along with greater ease, and as seas and rivers hindered his progress, he devised boats, galleys, and ships, to the astonishment of the elements, to waft him over to barbarous, unknown, and far distant nations, thence to bring or thither to carry corn. Besides, seeing that when he had tilled the ground, some years the corn perished in it for want of rain in due season, in others rotted or was drowned by its excess, sometimes spoiled by hail, eat by worms in the ear, or beaten down by storms, and so his stock was destroyed on the ground. We were told that ever since the days of yore he has found out a way to conjure the rain down from heaven only with cutting certain grass, common enough in the field, yet known to very few, some of which was then shown us. I took it to be the same as the plant, one of whose boughs being dipped by Jove's priest in the Agrian fountain on the Lycian mountain in Arcadia, in time of drought raised vapors which gathered into clouds, and then dissolved into rain that kindly moistened the whole country. Our master of arts was also said to have found a way to keep the rain up in the air, and make it to fall into the sea, also to annihilate the hail, suppress the winds, and remove storms as the Methanensians of Troezene used to do. And as in the fields thieves and plunderers sometimes stole, and took by force the corn and bread which others had toiled to get, he invented the art of building towns, forts, and castles to hoard and secure that staff of life. On the other hand, finding none in the fields, and hearing that it was hoarded up and secured in towns, forts, and castles, and watched with more care than ever were the golden pippins of the Hesperides, he turned engineer, and found ways to beat, storm, and demolish forts and castles with machines and warlike thunderbolts, battering rams, ballists, and catapults, whose shapes were shown to us, not over well understood by our engineers, architects, and other disciples of Vitruvius. As Master Philibert de Elorme, King Megistus's principal architect, has owned to us. And seeing that sometimes all these tools of destruction were baffled by the cunning subtlety or the subtle cunning, which you please of fortifiers, he lately invented cannons, field pieces, culverins, bombards, basiliscos, murdering instruments that dart iron, leaden, and brazen balls, some of them outweighing huge anvils. This by the means of a most dreadful powder, whose hellish compound and effect has even amazed nature, and made her own herself outdone by art. The Oxydracian thunders, hails, and storms, by which the people of that name immediately destroyed their enemies in the field being but mere potguns to these. For one of our great guns when used is more dreadful, more terrible, more diabolical, and maims, tears, breaks, slays, mows down, and sweeps away more men, and causes a greater consternation and destruction than 100 thunderbolts. Chapter 4.62. How Gaster invented an art to avoid being hurt or touched by cannonballs. Gaster, having secured himself with his corn within strongholds, has sometimes been attacked by enemies, his fortresses, by that thrice threefold cursed instrument, leveled and destroyed. His dearly beloved corn and bread snatched out of his mouth and sacked by a titanic force. Therefore he then sought means to preserve his walls, bastions, rampiers, and sconces from cannon shot, and to hinder the bullets from hitting him, stopping them in their flight, or at least from doing him or the besieged walls any damage. He showed us a trial of this which has been since used by Fronton, and is now common among the pastimes and harmless recreations of the Thelemates. I will tell you how he went to work, and pray for the future be a little more ready to believe what Plutarch affirms to have tried. Suppose a herd of goats were all scampering, as if the devil drove them, do but put a bit of aringo into the mouth of the hindmost nanny, and they will all stop stock still in the time you can tell 3. Thus Gaster, having caused a brass falcon to be charged with a sufficient quantity of gunpowder well purged from its sulfur, and curiously made up with fine camphor, he then had a suitable ball put into the piece, with 24 little pellets like hail shot, some round, some pearl fashion, then taking his aim and leveling it at a page of his, as if he would have hit him on the breast. About 60 strides off the piece, halfway between it and the page in a right line, he hanged on a gibbet by a rope of very large siderite or iron-like stone, otherwise called Herculean, formerly found on Ida in Phrygia by one Magnes, as Nicander writes, and commonly called lodestone. Then he gave fire to the prime on the piece's touch-hole, which in an instant consuming the powder, the ball and hail shot were with incredible violence and swiftness hurried out of the gun at its muzzle, that the air might penetrate to its chamber, where otherwise would have been a vacuum, which nature abhors so much, that this universal machine, heaven, air, land, and sea, would sooner return to the primitive chaos than admit the least void anywhere. Now the ball and small shot, which threatened the page with no less than quick destruction, lost their impetuosity and remained suspended and hovering round the stone. Nor did any of them, notwithstanding the fury with which they rushed, reach the page. Master Gaster could do more than all this yet, if you will believe me, for he invented a way how to cause bullets to fly backwards and recoil on those that sent them with as great a force, and in the very numerical parallel for which the guns were planted. And indeed, why should he have thought this difficult? Seeing the herb Ethiopes opens all locks whatsoever, and an echinus or remora, a silly weakly fish, in spite of all the winds that blow from the 32 points of the compass, will in the midst of a hurricane make you the biggest first-rate remain stock still, as if she were becalmed or the blustering tribe had blown their last. Nay, and with the flesh of that fish, preserved with salt, you may fish gold out of the deepest well that was ever sounded with a plummet, for it will certainly draw up the precious metal, since Democritus affirmed it. Theophrastus believed and experienced that there was an herb at whose single touch an iron wedge, though never so far driven into a huge log of the hardest wood that is, would presently come out. And it is this same herb your hickways, alias woodpeckers, use, when with some mighty axe anyone stops up the hole of their nests, which they industriously dig and make in the trunk of some sturdy tree. Since stags and hinds, when deeply wounded with darts, arrows, and bolts, if they do but meet the herb called dittany, which is common in Candia, and eat a little of it, presently the shafts come out and all is well again, even as kind Venus cured her beloved byblo Aeneas when he was wounded on the right thigh with an arrow by Juturna, Turnus's sister. Since the very wind of laurels, fig trees, or sea calves makes the thunder shear off insomuch that it never strikes them. Since at the sight of a ram, mad elephants recover their former senses. Since mad bulls coming near wild fig trees, called caprifyci, grow tame, and will not budge a foot as if they had the cramp. Since the venomous rage of vipers is assuaged, if you but touch them with a beechen bough. Since also Euphorion writes that in the Isle of Samos, before Juno's temple was built there, he has seen some beasts called needs, whose voice made the neighboring places gape and sink into a chasm and abyss. In short, since elders grow of a more pleasing sound, and fitter to make flutes, in such places where the crowing of cocks is not heard, as the ancient sages have writ and Theophrastus relates. As if the crowing of a cock dulled, flattened, and perverted the wood of the elder, as it is said to astonish and stupefy with fear that strong and resolute animal, a lion. I know that some have understood this of wild elder, that grows so far from towns or villages that the crowing of cocks cannot reach near it. And doubtless that sort ought to be preferred to the stenching common elder that grows about decayed and ruined places. But others have understood this in a higher sense, not literal, but allegorical, according to the method of the Pythagoreans, as when it was said that Mercury's statue could not be made of every sort of wood. To which sentence they gave this sense, that God is not to be worshipped in a vulgar form, but in a chosen and religious manner. In the same manner, by this elder which grows far from places where cocks are heard, the ancients meant that the wise and studious ought not to give their minds to trivial or vulgar music, but to that which is celestial, divine, angelical, more abstracted, and brought from remoter parts, that is, from a region where the crowing of cocks is not heard. For to denote a solitary and unfrequented place, we say cocks are never heard to crow there. Chapter 4.63 How Pantagruel fell asleep near the island of Chainif, and of the problems proposed to be solved when he waked. The next day, merrily pursuing our voyage, we came in sight of the island of Chainif, where Pantagruel's ship could not arrive, the wind chopping about, and then failing us so that we were becalmed and could hardly get ahead, tacking about from starboard to larboard and larboard to starboard, though to our sails we added drabblers. With this accident we were all out of sorts, moping, drooping, metagrabolized, as dull as done in the mire, in 100 sol fa ut flat, out of tune, off the hinges and I don't know howish, without caring to speak one single syllable to each other. Pantagruel was taking a nap, slumbering and nodding on the quarterdeck by the cuddy, with an heliodorus in his hand. For still it was his custom to sleep better by book than by heart. Epistemon was conjuring, with his astrolabe, to know what latitude we were in. Friar John was got into the cook-room, examining, by the ascendant of the spits and the horoscope of ragouts and fricassees, what time of day it might then be. Panurge, sweet baby, held a stalk of Pantagruelians, alias hemp, next his tongue, and with it made pretty bubbles and bladders. Gymnast was making toothpickers with lentisk. Panocrates, dozing, dozed, and dreaming, dreamed, tickled himself to make himself laugh, and with one finger scratched his noddle where it did not itch. Carpelin, with a nutshell and a trencher of vern, that's a card in Gascony, was making a pretty little merry windmill, cutting the card long ways into 4 slips, and fastening them with a pin to the convex of the nut, and its concave to the tarred side of the gunwale of the ship. Eusthenes, bestriding one of the guns, was playing on it with his fingers as if it had been a trump marine. Rhizotome, with the soft coat of a field tortoise, alias ecleptomole, was making himself a velvet purse. Xenomanes was patching up an old weather-beaten lantern with a hawk's jesses. Our pilot, good man, was pulling maggots out of the seamen's noses. At last Friar John, returning from the forecastle, perceived that Pantagruel was awake. Then breaking this obstinate silence, he briskly and cheerfully asked him how a man should kill time and raise good weather during a calm at sea. Panurge, whose belly thought his throat cut, backed the motion presently and asked for a pill to purge melancholy. Epistemon also came on, and asked how a man might be ready to bepiss himself with laughing when he has no heart to be merry. Gymnast, arising, demanded a remedy for a dimness of eyes. Panocrates, after he had a while rubbed his noddle and shaken his ears, asked how one might avoid dog sleep. "Hold!" cried Pantagruel, "the Peripatetics have wisely made a rule that all problems, questions, and doubts, which are offered to be solved ought to be certain, clear, and intelligible." "What do you mean by dog sleep?" I mean, answered Ponocrates, to sleep fasting in the sun at noonday, as the dogs do. Rhizotome, who lay stooping on the pump, raised his drowsy head and lazily yawning. By natural sympathy set almost everyone in the ship a yawning too. Then he asked for a remedy against oscitations and gapings. Xenomanes, half puzzled, and tired out with new vamping his antiquated lantern, asked how the hold of the stomach might be so well ballasted and freighted from the keel to the main hatch, with stores well stowed, that our human vessels might not heel or be walt, but well trimmed and stiff. Carpelin, twirling his diminutive windmill, asked how many motions are to be felt in nature before a gentleman may be said to be hungry. Eusthenes, hearing them talk, came from between decks, and from the capstan called out to know why a man that is fasting, bit by a serpent also fasting, is in greater danger of death than when man and serpent have eat their breakfasts, why a man's fasting spittle is poisonous to serpents and venomous creatures. One single solution may serve for all your problems, gentlemen, answered Pantagruel, and one single medicine for all such symptoms and accidents. My answer shall be short, not to tire you with a long, needless train of pedantic cant. The belly has no ears, nor is it to be filled with fair words. You shall be answered to content by signs and gestures. As formerly at Rome, Tarquin the Proud, its last king, sent an answer by signs to his son Sextus, who was among the Gabii at Gabii. Saying this, he pulled the string of a little bell, and Friar John hurried away to the cookroom. The son having sent his father a messenger to know how he might bring the Gabii under a close subjection, the king, mistrusting the messenger, made him no answer, and only took him into his privy garden, and in his presence with his sword lopped off the heads of the tall poppies that were there. The express returned without any other dispatch, yet having related to the prince what he had seen his father do, he easily understood that by those signs he advised him to cut off the heads of the chief men in the town, the better to keep under the rest of the people. Chapter 4.64. How Pantagruel gave no answer to the problems. Pantagruel then asked what sort of people dwelt in that damned island. They are, answered Xenomanes, all hypocrites, holy mountebanks, tumblers of beads, mumblers of Ave Marias, spiritual comedians, sham saints, hermits, all of them poor rogues who, like the hermit of Lormont between Blaye and Bordeaux, live wholly on alms given them by passengers. Catch me there if you can, cried Panurge. May the devil's head cook conjure my bumgut into a pair of bellows if ever you find me among them. Hermits, sham saints, living forms of mortification, holy mountebanks, avaunt. In the name of your father Satan, get out of my sight. When the devil's a hog, you shall eat bacon. I shall not forget, yet a while our fat conciliapetes of Chesil. Oh, that Beelzebub and Astaroth had counseled them to hang themselves out of the way, and they had don't. We had not then suffered so much by devilish storms as we did for having seen M. Hark ye me, dear rogue, Xenomanes my friend, I prithee are these hermits, hypocrites, and eavesdroppers maids or married? Is there anything of the feminine gender among them? Could a body hypocritically take there a small hypocritical touch? Will they lie backwards and let out their forerooms? There's a fine question to be asked, cried Pantagruel. Yes, yes, answered Xenomanes. You may find there many goodly hypocritesses, jolly spiritual actresses, kind hermitesses, women that have a plaguey deal of religion. Then there's the copies of M, little hypocritolins, sham sanctitos, and hermitillins. Foe! Away with them, cried Friar John, a young saint, an old devil. Mark this, an old saying, and as true a one as a young whore, an old saint. Were there not such, continued Xenomanes, the Isle of Chanif, for want of a multiplication of progeny, had long ere this been desert and desolate. Pantagruel sent them by gymnast in the pinnace 78,000 fine, pretty little gold half-crowns, of those that are marked with a lantern. After this he asked, what's o'clock? Past 9, answered Epistomen. It is then the best time to go to dinner, said Pantagruel. For the sacred line so celebrated by Aristophanes in his play called Conchinatrices is at hand, never failing when the shadow is decempetal. Formerly, among the Persians, dinner time was at a set hour only for kings, as for all others, their appetite and their belly was their clock. When that chimed, they thought it time to go to dinner. So we find in Plautus a certain parasite making a heavy dew, and sadly railing at the inventors of hour-glasses and dials as being unnecessary things, there being no clock more regular than the belly. Diogenes, being asked at what times a man ought to eat, answered, the rich when he is hungry, the poor when he has anything to eat. Physicians more properly say that the canonical hours are to rise at 5, to dine at 9, to sup at 5, to sleep at 9. The famous King Pedicirus's magic was different here. The officers for the gut came in, and got ready the tables and cupboards, laid the cloth, whose sight and pleasant smell were very comfortable, and brought plates, napkins, salts, tankards, flagons, tallboys, ewers, tumblers, cups, goblets, basins, and cisterns. Friar John, at the head of the stewards, sewers, yeomen of the pantry, and of the mouth, tasters, carvers, cupbearers, and cupboard keepers, brought 4 stately pasties, so huge that they put me in mind of the 4 bastions at Turin. Oddsfish, how manfully did they storm them! What havoc did they make with the long train of dishes that came after them! How bravely did they stand to their pan puddings, and paid off their dust! How merrily did they soak their noses! The fruit was not yet brought in, when a fresh gale at west and by north began to fill the main course, mizzen sail, foresail, tops, and topgallants, for which blessing they all sung divers hymns of thanks and praise. When the fruit was on the table, Pantagruel asked, Now tell me, gentlemen, are your doubts fully resolved or no? I gape and yawn no more, answered Rhizotome. I sleep no longer like a dog, said Panocrates. I have cleared my eyesight, said Gymnast. I have broke my fast, said Eusthenes, so that for this whole day I shall be secure from the danger of my spittle. Asps, black wag-leg flies, domeses, amphispines, Spanish flies, dryaenades, anarujuts, catobulbs, dragons, abeticimens, horned snakes, elopes, ilhartraphs, caterpillars, anhydrides, amoebates, crocodiles, falvases, epimaus, toads, galotes, ilhatrabins, nightmares, harmines, aractes, mad dogs, handans, asterians, calotes, eichels, alchirits, cypriodes, jararies, arges, cavesates, illicines, spiders, cawhares, pharaoh's mice, starry lizards, snakes, cassugers, etelabes, cuhursks two sea hares, escalabotes, tongued adders, chalcidic newts, hemorrhoids, amphibious footed serpents, basilisks, pents, manticores, fitches, sankers, mollers, sucking water cockatrices, mouse serpents, snakes, dipsades, shrewmice, milliers, salamanders, stinkfish, megalons, slowworms, stuff, spitting asps, stellions, sabrins, porphyry, scorpions, blood-sucking flies, periods, scorpions, horn fritters, phalanges, hornworms, scolopenders, penfretins, scalivotins, tarantulas, pine tree worms, solifudars, blind worms, rutels, deaf asps, tetragnathias, worms, horse leeches, terrastales, ragans, salt haters, vipers and sea, ragans, rot serpents. Chapter 4.65 How Pantagruel Passed the Time with His Servants. In what hierarchy of such venomous creatures do you place Panurge's future spouse? Asked Friar John. Art thou speaking ill of women? Cried Panurge, thou mangy scoundrel, thou sorry, naughty-peaked shaveling monk. By the Cenomanic paunch and jixi, said Epistemon, Euripides has written, and makes Andromache say it, that by industry and the help of the gods men had found remedies against all poisonous creatures, but none was yet found against a bad wife. This flaunting Euripides, cried Panurge, was gabbling against women every foot, and therefore was devoured by dogs as a judgment from above, as Aristophanes observes. Let's go on. Let him speak that is next. I can leak now like any stone horse, said then Epistemon. I am, said Zenomanes, full as an egg and round as a hoop. My ship's hold can hold no more, and will now make shift to bear a steady sail. Said Carpalin, a truce with thirst, a truce with hunger. They are strong, but wine and meat are stronger. I'm no more in the dumps, cried Panurge, my heart's a pound lighter. I'm in the right queue now, as brisk as a body louse, and as merry as a beggar. For my part, I know what I do when I drink, and it is a true thing, though tease in your Euripides, that is said by that jolly toper Silenus of blessed memory, that the man's emphatically mad, who drinks the best, yet can be sad. We must not fail to return our humble and hearty thanks to the being who, with this good bread, this cool delicious wine, these good meats and rare dainties, removes from our bodies and minds these pains and perturbations, and at the same time fills us with pleasure and with food. But methinks, sir, you did not give an answer to Friar John's question, which, as I take it, was how to raise good weather. Since you ask no more than this easy question, answered Pantagruel, I'll strive to give you satisfaction, and some other time we'll talk of the rest of the problems, if you will. Well then, Friar John asked how good weather might be raised. Have we not raised it? Look up and see our full topsails. Hark how the wind whistles through the shrouds, what a stiff gale it blows. Observe the rattling of the tacklings, and see the sheets that fasten the mainsail behind. The force of the wind puts them upon the stretch. While we passed our time merrily, the dull weather also passed away. And while we raised the glasses to our mouths, we also raised the wind by a secret sympathy in nature. Thus Atlas and Hercules clubbed to raise and underprop the falling sky, if you'll believe the wise mythologists, but they raised it some half an inch too high, Atlas to entertain his guest Hercules more pleasantly, and Hercules to make himself amends for the thirst which some time before had tormented him in the deserts of Africa. Your good father, said Friar John, interrupting him, takes care to free many people from such an inconveniency. For I have been told by many venerable doctors that his chief butler, Tirelupin, saves above 1,800 pipes of wine yearly to make servants, and all comers and goers drink before they are adry. As the camels and dromedaries of a caravan, continued Pantagruel, used to drink for the thirst that's past, for the present, and for that to come, so did Hercules. And being thus excessively raised, this gave new motion to the sky, which is that of titubation and trepidation, about which our crack-brained astrologers make such a pother. This, said Panurge, makes the saying good. While jolly companions carouse it together, a fig for the storm, it gives way to good weather. Nay, continued Pantagruel, some will tell you that we have not only shortened the time of the calm, but also much disburthened the ship, not like Aesop's basket, by easing it of the provision, but by breaking our fasts, and that a man is more terrestrial and heavy when fasting than when he has eaten and drank, even as they pretend that he weighs more dead than living. However it is, you will grant they are in the right who take their morning's draught and breakfast before a long journey. Then say that the horses will perform the better, and that a spur in the head is worth 2 in the flank, or, in the same horse dialect, that a cup in the pate is a mile in the gate. Don't you know that formerly the Amycleans worshipped the noble Bacchus above all other gods, and gave him the name of Scylla, which in the Doric dialect signifies wings? For, as the birds raise themselves by a towering flight with their wings above the clouds, so, with the help of soaring Bacchus, the powerful juice of the grape, our spirits are exalted to a pitch above themselves, our bodies are more sprightly, and their earthly parts become soft and pliant. Chapter 4.66. How, by Pantagruel's order, the Muses were saluted near the Isle of Ganabim. This fair wind and as fine talk brought us in sight of a high land, which Pantagruel, discovering afar off, showed it Zenomanes, and asked him, Do you see yonder to the leeward a high rock with 2 tops, much like Mount Parnassus in Phocis? I do plainly, answered Zenomanes, 'tis the Isle of Ganabim. Have you a mind to go ashore there? No, returned Pantagruel. You do well indeed, said Xenomanes, for there is nothing worth seeing in the place. The people are all thieves, yet there is the finest fountain in the world, and a very large forest towards the right top of the mountain. Your fleet may take in wood and water there. He that spoke last spoke well, quoth Panurge. Let us not by any means be so mad as to go among a parcel of thieves and sharpers. You may take my word for it, this place is just such another as, to my knowledge, formerly were the islands of Sark and Herm, between the smaller and the greater Britain, such as was the Ponropolis of Philip in Thrace. Islands of thieves, banditti, picaroons, robbers, ruffians, and murderers, worse than rawhead and bloody bones, and full as honest as the senior fellows of the College of Iniquity, the very outcasts of the county jail's common side. As you love yourself, do not go among M. If you go, you'll come off but bluely, if you come off at all. If you will not believe me, at least believe what the good and wise Xenomanes tells you, for may I never stir if they are not worse than the very cannibals, they would certainly eat us alive. Do not go among M, I pray you, it were safer to take a journey to hell. Hark! By Cod's body, I hear M ringing the alarm bell most dreadfully, as the Gascons about Bordeaux used formerly to do against the commissaries and officers for the tax on salt, or my ears tingle. Let's sheer off. Believe me, sir, said Friar John, let's rather land. We will rid the world of that vermin, and in there for nothing. Old Nick goeth thee for me, quoth Panurge. This rash harebrained devil of a friar fears nothing, but ventures and runs on like a mad devil as he is, and cares not a rush what becomes of others, as if everyone was a monk, like his friarship. A pox on grinning honor, say I. Go to, returned the friar, thou mangy naughty peak. Thou forlorn druggle-headed sneaksby. And may a million of black devils anatomize thy cockle brain. The hen-hearted rascal is so cowardly that he bewrays himself for fear every day. If thou art so afraid, dunghill, do not go, stay here and be hanged, or go and hide thy loggerhead under Madame Proserpine's petticoat. Panurge hearing this, his breech began to make buttons, so he slunk in an instant, and went to hide his head down in the bread-room among the musty biscuits and the orts and scraps of broken bread. Pantagruel in the meantime said to the rest, I feel a pressing retraction in my soul, which like a voice admonishes me not to land there. Whenever I have felt such emotion within me, I have found myself happy in avoiding what it directed me to shun, or in undertaking what it prompted me to do, and I never had occasion to repent following its dictates. As much, said Epistemon, is related of the demon of Socrates, so celebrated among the academics. Well then, sir, said Friar John, while the ship's crew water have you a mind to have good sport. Panurge is got down somewhere in the hold, where he is crept into some corner, and lurks like a mouse in a cranny. Let M give the word for the gunner to fire yon gun over the roundhouse on the poop. This will serve to salute the muses of this anti-Parnasius. Besides, the powder does but decay in it. You are in the right, said Pantagruel. Here, give the word for the gunner. The gunner immediately came, and was ordered by Pantagruel to fire that gun, and then charge it with fresh powder, which was soon done. The gunners of the other ships, frigates, galleons, and galleys of the fleet, hearing us fire, gave every one a gun to the island, which made such a horrid noise that you would have sworn heaven had been tumbling about our ears. Chapter 4.67 How Panurge bewrayed himself for fear, and of the huge cat Rotelardus, which he took for a puny devil. Panurge, like a wild, addle-pated, giddy goat, sallies out of the bread-room in his shirt, with nothing else about him but one of his stockings, half on, half off about his heel, like a rough-footed pigeon, his hair and beard all bepowdered with crumbs of bread in which he had been over head and ears, and a huge and mighty puss partly wrapped up in his other stocking. In this equipage, his chaps moving like a monkey, who's alouse hunting, his eyes staring like a dead pig's, his teeth chattering, and his bum quivering, the poor dog fled to Friar John, who was then sitting by the chainwales of the starboard side of the ship, and prayed him heartily to take pity on him and keep him in the safeguard of his trusty Bilbo, swearing, by his share of papimony, that he had seen all hell broke loose. Woe is me, my Jacky, cried he, my dear Johnny, my old crony, my brother, my ghostly father. All the devils keep holiday, all the devils keep their feast today, man. Pork and peas, choke me if ever thou sawest such preparations in thy life, for an infernal feast. Dost thou see the smoke of hell's kitchens? This he said, showing him the smoke of the gunpowder above the ships. Thou never sawest so many damned souls since thou wast born, and so fair, so bewitching they seem, that one would swear they are Stygian ambrosia. I thought at first, God forgive me, that they had been English souls, and I don't know but that this morning the Isle of Horses near Scotland was sacked, with all the English who had surprised it, by the Lords of Terms and Essay. Friar John, at the approach of Panurge, was entertained with a kind of smell that was not like that of gunpowder, nor altogether so sweet as musk, which made him turn Panurge about, and then he saw that his shirt was dismally bepawed and bewrayed with fresh surreverence. The retentive faculty of the nerve, which restrains the muscle called sphincter, teased the arse-hole, and it please you, was relaxated by the violence of the fear which he had been in during his fantastic visions. Add to this the thundering noise of the shooting, which seems more dreadful between decks than above. Nor ought you to wonder at such a mishap, for one of the symptoms and accidents of fear is that it often opens the wicket of the cupboard wherein second-hand meat is kept for a time. Let's illustrate this noble theme with some examples. Messer Pandolf de la Casena of Siena, riding post from Rome, came to Chambery, and alighting at honest Vinitz took one of the pitchforks in the stable. Then turning to the innkeeper, said to him, De Roma in qua io non son andato del corpo. Di gratia pigli in mano questa forza, et fammi pora. I have not had a stool since I left Rome. I pray thee take this pitchfork and fright me. Vinit took it, and made several offers as if he would in good earnest have hit the signor, but all in vain. So the Sienese said to him, Si tu non fai altrament, tu non fai nulla. Piero sforzati di adoperarli più guaglardament. If thou dost not go another way to work, thou hadst as good do nothing, therefore try to bestir thyself more briskly. With this, Vinit lent him such a swinging stoter with the pitchfork souse between the neck and the collar of his jerkin, that down fell Signor on the ground arsiversy, with his spindle shanks wide straggling over his pole. Then mine host sputtering, with a full-mouthed laugh, said to his guest by Beelzebub's bumgut, Much good may it do you, Signor Italiano. Take notice this is datum camberiaci, given at Chambery. 'Twas well the Sienese had untrussed his points, and let down his drawers, for this physic worked with him as soon as he took it, and as copious was the evacuation as that of 9 buffaloes and 14 missificating archlubbers. Which operation being over, the mannerly Sienese courteously gave mine host a whole bushel of thanks, saying to him, Io ti ringratio, bel messer. Cosi facendo tu ai esparmiata la spesa dun servicial. I thank thee, good landlord, by this thou hast e'en saved me the expense of a clyster. I'll give you another example of Edward V, King of England. Master Francis Villain, being banished France, fled to him, and got so far into his favor as to be privy to all his household affairs. One day the king, being on his close stool, showed Villain the arms of France, and said to him, Dost thou see what respect I have for thy French kings? I have none of their arms anywhere, but in this backside, near my close stool. Odds life, said the buffoon, how wise, prudent, and careful of your health your highness is. How carefully your learned doctor, Thomas Linacre, looks after you. He saw that now you grow old you are inclined to be somewhat costive, and every day we're fain to have an apothecary, I mean a suppository or clyster, thrust into your royal knockandrow. So he has, much to the purpose, induced you to place here the arms of France. For the very sight of them puts you into such a dreadful fright that you immediately let fly as much as would come from 18 squattering Benassi of Peonia. And if they were painted in other parts of your house, by Jingo, you would presently conskite yourself wherever you saw them. Nay, had you but here a picture of the great oriflamme of France, odds bodikins, your tripes and bowels would be in no small danger of dropping out at the orifice of your posteriors. But hen at geitrum hen. A silly cockney am I not, as ever did from Paris come. And with a rope and sliding, not my neck shall know what weighs my bum. A cockney of short reach, I say, shallow of judgment and judging shallowly, to wonder that you should cause your points to be untrussed in your chamber before you come into this closet. By'r lady, At first I thought your close stool had stood behind the hangings of your bed. Otherwise, it seemed very odd to me you should untruss so far from the place of evacuation. But now I find I was a gull, a whittle, a woodcock, a mere ninny, a dolt head, a noddy, a changeling, a calf-lolly, a dodipole. You do wisely, by the mass, you do wisely. For had you not been ready to clap your hind face on the mustard pot as soon as you came within sight of these arms mark, ye me, cop's body the bottom of your breeches had supplied the office of a close stool. Friar John, stopping the handle of his face with his left hand, did with the forefinger of the right point out Panurge's shirt to Pantagruel, who, seeing him in this pickle, scared, appalled, shivering, raving, staring, bewrayed, and torn with the claws of the famous cat Rotelardus, could not choose but laugh, and said to him, "Prithee, what wouldst thou do with this cat?" "With this cat," quoth Panurge, "the devil scratch me if I did not think it had been a young, soft-chinned devil, which, with this same stocking instead of mitten, I had snatched up in the great hutch of hell as thievishly as any sizer of Montague College could have done. The devil take Tybert. I feel it has all bepinked my poor hide, and drawn on it to the life I don't know how many lobsters' whiskers." With this he threw his boar-cat down. "Go, go," said Pantagruel, "be bathed and cleaned, calm your fears, put on a clean shift and then your clothes." "What? Do you think I am afraid?" cried Panurge. "Not I protest. By the testicles of Hercules, I am more hardy, bold, and stout, though I say it that should not, than if I had swallowed as many flies as are put into plum cakes and other paste at Paris from midsummer to Christmas. But what's this? Huh? Oh's ho! How the devil came I by this? Do you call this what the cat left in the malt? Filth, dirt, dung, dejection, fecal matter, excrement, stercoration, surreverence, ordure, second-hand meats, fumes, straunce, cybele, or spirathe? 'Tis Hibernian saffron, I protest. Ha. 'Tis Irish saffron, by Saint Patrick, and so much for this time. Selah, let's drink." The Fifth Book. Chapter 5I. How Pantagruel arrived at the Ringing Island, and of the noise that we heard. Pursuing our voyage, we sailed 3 days without discovering anything. On the 4th we made land. Our pilot told us that it was the Ringing Island, and indeed we heard a kind of a confused and often repeated noise that seemed to us at a great distance not unlike the sound of great, middle-sized, and little bells rung all at once, as 'tis customary at Paris, Tours, Giorgio, Nantes, and elsewhere on high holidays, and the nearer we came to the land, the louder we heard that jangling. Some of us doubted that it was the Didonian kettle, or the portico called Heptaphone in Olympia, or the eternal humming of the Colossus raised on Memnon's tomb in Thebes of Egypt, or the horrid din that used formerly to be heard about a tomb at Lipara, one of the Aeolian Islands. But this did not square with chorography. "I do not know," said Pantagruel, "but that some swarms of bees hereabouts may be taking a ramble in the air, and so the neighborhood make this dingle-dangle with pans, kettles, and basins, the Corybantine symbols of Cybele, grandmother of the gods, to call them back. Let's hearken." When we were nearer, among the everlasting ringing of these indefatigable bells, we heard the singing, as we thought, of some men. For this reason, before we offered to land on the Ringing Island, Pantagruel was of opinion that we should go in the pinnace to a small rock, near which we discovered an hermitage and a little garden. There we found a diminutive old hermit, whose name was Braguibus, born at Glenay. He gave us a full account of all the jangling, and regaled us after a strange sort of fashion for livelong days did he make us fast, assuring us that we should not be admitted into the Ringing Island otherwise, because it was then one of the 4 fasting, or ember weeks. "As I love my belly," quoth Panurge, "I by no means understand this riddle. Methinks this should rather be one of the 4 windy weeks, for while we fast, we are only puffed up with wind. Pray now, good Father Hermit, have not you here some other pastime besides fasting? Methinks it is somewhat of the leanest. We might well enough be without so many palace holidays and those fasting times of yours." "In my Donatus," quoth Friar John, "I could find yet but 3 times or tenses, the preterit, the present, and the future. Doubtless here the 4th ought to be a work of supererogation." "That time or tense," said Epistemon, "is aorist, derived from the preterimperfect tense of the Greeks, admitted in war, and odd cases. Patience, perforce, is a remedy for a mad dog. Saith the hermit, it is, as I told you, fatal to go against this. Whosoever does it is a rank heretic, and wants nothing but fire and faggot, that's certain. To deal plainly with you, my dear pater, cried Panurge, being at sea, I much more fear being wet than being warm, and being drowned than being burned. Well, however, let us fast, a God's name. Yet I have fasted so long that it has quite undermined my flesh, and I fear that at last the bastions of this bodily fort of mine will fall to ruin. Besides, I am much more afraid of vexing you in this same trade of fasting. For the devil a bit I understand anything in it, and it becomes me very scurvily, as several people have told me, and I am apt to believe them. For my part, I have no great stomach to fasting, for alas, it is as easy as pissing a bed, and a trade of which anybody may set up. There needs no tools. I am much more inclined not to fast for the future, for to do so there is some stock required, and some tools are set a work. No matter, since you are so steadfast and would have us fast, let us fast as we can, and then breakfast in the name of famine. Now we are come to these Asurial idle days. I vow had quite put them out of my head long ago. If we must fast, said Pantagruel, I see no other remedy but to get rid of it as soon as we can, as we would out of a bad way. I'll in that space of time somewhat look over my papers, and examine whether the marine study be as good as ours at land. For Plato, to describe a silly, raw, ignorant fellow, compares him to those that are bred on shipboard, as we would do one bred up in a barrel, who never saw anything but through the bunghole. To tell you the short and the long of the matter, our fasting was most hideous and terrible. For the first day we fasted on fisticuffs, the second at cudgels, the third at sharps, and the fourth at blood and wounds. Such was the order of the fairies. Chapter 5.2. How the ringing island had been inhabited by the citizens, who were become birds. Having fasted as aforesaid, the hermit gave us a letter for one whom he called Albion Camer, Master Editus of the ringing island. But Panurge greeting him called him Master Antitus. He was a little queer old fellow, bald-patched, with a snout whereat you might easily have lighted a card match, and a phiz as red as a cardinal's cap. He made us all very welcome, upon the hermit's recommendation, hearing that we had fasted, as I have told you. When we had well stuffed our puddings, he gave us an account of what was remarkable in the island, affirming that it had been at first inhabited by the citizens, but that, according to the course of nature as all things, you know, are subject to change they were become birds. There I had a full account of all that Ateus Capito, Paulus, Marcellus, A. Gellius, Athenaeus, Suidas, Ammonius, and others had writ of the Cyticians and Sicinists, and then we thought we might as easily believe the transmutations of Nectymene, Progny, Ides, Alcyone, Antigone, Tereus, and other birds. Nor did we think it more reasonable to doubt of the transmogrification of the Macrobian children into swans, or that of the men of Pallene in Thrace into birds, as soon as they had bathed themselves in the Tritonic lake. After this, the devil a word could we get out of him, but of birds in cages. The cages were spacious, costly, magnificent, and of an admirable architecture. The birds were large, fine, and neat accordingly, looking as like the men in my country as one pea does like another. For they ate and drank like men, muted like men, endued or digested like men, farted like men, but stunk like devils, slept, billed, and trod their females like men, but somewhat oftener. In short, had you seen and examined them from top to toe, you would have laid your head to a turnip that they had been mere men. However, they were nothing less, as Master Editus told us, assuring us at the same time that they were neither secular nor laic. And the truth is, the diversity of their feathers and plumes did not a little puzzle us. Some of them were all over as white as swans, others as black as crows, many as gray as owls, others black and white like magpies, some all red like red birds, and others purple and white like some pigeons. He called the males clerghawks, monkhawks, priesthawks, abbot-hawks, bishhawks, cardinhawks, and one pope-hawk, who is a species by himself. He called the females clergkites, nunkites, priestkites, abbaskites, bishkites, cardinkites, and popekites. However, said he, as hornets and drones will get among the bees, and there do nothing but buzz, eat, and spoil everything. So, for these last 300 years, a vast swarm of bigatellos flocked, I do not know how, among these goodly birds every fifth full moon, and have bemuted, bewrayed, and conskited the whole island. They are so hard-favored and monstrous that none can abide them. For their wry necks make a figure like a crooked billet, their paws are hairy, like those of rough-footed pigeons, their claws and pounces, belly and breech, like those of the stymphaliid harpies. Nor is it possible to root them out, for if you get rid of one, straight 24 new ones fly thither. There had been need of another monster hunter such as was Hercules, for Friar John had liked to have run distracted about it, so much he was nettled and puzzled in the matter. As for the good Pantagruel, he was even served as was Messer Priapus, contemplating the sacrifices of Ceres for want of skin. Chapter 5.3 How there is but one Popock in the ringing island. We then asked Master Oeditus why there was but one Popock among such venerable birds multiplied in all their species. He answered that such was the first institution and fatal destiny of the stars, that the clerghawks begot the priesthawks and monkhawks without carnal copulation. As some bees are born of a young bull, the priesthawks begat the bishhawks the stately cardinhawks, and the stately cardinhawks, if they live long enough, at last come to be Popock. Of this last kind there never is more than one at a time. As in a beehive there is but one king, and in the world is but one sun. When the Popock dies, another arises in his stead out of the whole brood of cardinhawks, that is, as you must understand it all along, without carnal copulation. So that there is in that species an individual unity, with a perpetuity of succession, neither more or less than in the Arabian phoenix. 'Tis true that, about 2,760 moons ago, 2 Popocks were seen upon the face of the earth. But then you never saw in your lives such a woeful rout and hurly-burly as was all over this island. For all these same birds did so peck, clapperclaw, and maul one another all that time, that there was the devil and all to do, and the island was in a fair way of being left without inhabitants. Some stood up for this Popock, some for t'other. Some, struck with a dumbness, were as mute as so many fishes. The devil a note was to be got out of them. Part of the merry bells here were as silent as if they had lost their tongues, I mean their clappers. During these troublesome times, they called to their assistance the emperors, kings, dukes, earls, barons, and commonwealths of the world that live on t'other side the water. Nor was this schism and sedition at an end till one of them died, and the plurality was reduced to a unity. We then asked what moved those birds to be thus continually chanting and singing. He answered that it was the bells that hung on the top of their cages. Then he said to us, "Will you have me make these monkhawks whom you see bardicuculated with a bag, such as you use to still brandy, sing like any woodlarks?" "Pray do," said we. He then gave 6 pulls to a little rope, which caused a diminutive bell to give so many ting-tangs. And presently a parcel of monkhawks ran to him as if the devil had drove and fell a-singing like mad. "Pray, master," cried Panurge, "if I also rang this bell could I make those other birds yonder, with red herring-colored feathers, sing?" "Ay, marry would you," returned Oeditus. With this Panurge hanged himself, by the hands, I mean, at the bell-rope's end, and no sooner made it speak, but those smoked birds hied them thither and began to lift up their voices and make a sort of untowardly hoarse noise, which I grudge to call singing. Oeditus indeed told us that they fed on nothing but fish, like the herons and cormorants of the world, and that they were a 5th kind of cuculati newly stamped. He added that he had been told by Robert Valbring, who lately passed that way in his return from Africa, that a 6th kind was to fly hither out of hand, which he called Capus hawks, more grum, vinegar-faced, brain-sick, froward, and loathsome than any kind whatsoever in the whole island. Africa, said Pantagruel, still uses to produce some new and monstrous thing. Chapter 5.4 How the birds of the ringing island were all passengers. Since you have told us, said Pantagruel, how the Popock is begot by the cardinhawks by the bishhawks, and the bishhawks by the priesthawks, and the priesthawks by the clerghawks, I would gladly know whence you have these same clerghawks. They are all of them passengers, or travelling birds, returned Edetus, and come hither from t'other world, part out of a vast country called Wantobred, the rest out of another toward the west, which they style too many of 'em. From these two countries flock hither, every year, whole legions of these clerghawks, leaving their fathers, mothers, friends, and relations. This happens when there are too many children, whether male or female, in some good family of the latter country, insomuch that the house would come to nothing if the paternal estate were shared among them all, as reason requires, nature directs, and God commands. For this cause parents use to rid themselves of that inconveniency by packing off the younger fry, and forcing them to seek their fortune in this Isle Bossart, Crooked Island. I suppose he means 50 Isle Bouchart, near Chinon, cried Panurge. No, replied t'other, I mean Bossart Crooked, for there is not 1 in 10 among them but is either crooked, crippled, blinking, limping, ill-favored, deformed, or an unprofitable load to the earth. 'Twas quite otherwise among the heathens, said Pantagruel, when they used to receive a maiden among the number of vestals. For Leo Antistius affirms that it was absolutely forbidden to admit a virgin into that order if she had any vice in her soul or defect in her body, though it were but the smallest spot on any part of it. I can hardly believe, continued Edetus, that their dams on t'other side the water go 9 months with them. For they cannot endure them 9 years, nay, scarce 7 sometimes, in the house, but by putting only a shirt over the other clothes of the young urchins, and lopping off I do well know how many hairs from their crowns, mumbling certain apostrophized and expiatory words, they visibly, openly, and plainly, by a Pythagorical metempsychosis, without the least hurt, transmogrify them into such birds as you now see. Much after the fashion of the Egyptian heathens, who used to constitute their Isiacs by shaving them and making them put on certain linostoles, or surplices. However, I don't know, my good friends, but that these things, whether clergites, monkites, and abbascites, instead of singing pleasant verses and choristers, such as used to be sung to Oromoses by Zoroaster's institution, may be bellowing out such cataracts and cytherpes, cursed lamentable and wretched imprecations, as were usually offered to the Aromanian demon. Being thus in devotion for their kind friends and relations that transformed them into birds, whether when they were maids, or thornbacks, in their prime, or at their last prayers. But the greatest numbers of our birds came out of Wantobred, which, though a barren country, where the days are of a most tedious lingering length, overstocks this whole island with the lower class of birds. For hither fly the Asaphes that inhabit that land, either when they are in danger of passing their time scurvily for want of belly timber, being unable, or, what's more likely, unwilling to take heart of grace and follow some honest lawful calling, or too proud-hearted and lazy to go to service in some sober family. The same is done by your frantic enamorados, who, when crossed in their wild desires, grow stark staring mad, and choose this life suggested to them by their despair, too cowardly to make them swing like their brother Iphis of doleful memory. There is another sort, that is, your jailbirds, who, having done some rogue's trick or other heinous villainy, and being sought up and down to be trussed up and made to ride the 2- or 3-legged mare that groans for them, warily scour off and come here to save their bacon. Because all these sorts of birds are here provided for, and grow in an instant as fat as hogs, though they came as lean as rakes. For having the benefit of the clergy, they are as safe as thieves in a mill within this sanctuary. But asked Pantagruel, do these birds never return to the world where they were hatched? Some do, answered Edetus, formerly very few, very seldom, very late, and very unwillingly. However, since some certain eclipses, by the virtue of the celestial constellations, a great crowd of them fled back to the world. Nor do we fret or vex ourselves a jot about it. For those that stay wisely sing, the fewer the better cheer, and all those that fly away first cast off their feathers here among these nettles and briars. Accordingly we found some thrown by there, and as we looked up and down, we chanced to light on what some people will hardly thank us for having discovered, and thereby hangs a tale. Chapter 5.5 Of the dumb nighthawks of the ringing island. These words were scarce out of his mouth when some 25 or 30 birds flew towards us. They were of a hue and feather like which we had not seen anything in the whole island. Their plumes were as changeable as the skin of the chameleon, and the flower of Tripolion, or Teucrian. They had all under the left wing a mark like 2 diameters dividing a circle into equal parts, or, if you had rather have it so, like a perpendicular line falling on a right line. The marks which each of them bore were much of the same shape, but of different colors, for some were white, others green, some red, others purple, and some blue. "Who are those?" asked Panurge, "and how do you call them?" "They are mongrels," quoth Edetus. "We call them night hawks, and they have a great number of rich commanderies, fat livings in your world." "Good your worship," said I, "make them give us a song, an't please you, that we may know how they sing." "They scorn your words," cried Edetus. "They are none of your singing birds, but to make amends they feed as much as the best 2 of them all." "Pray where are their hens? Where are their females?" said I. "They have none," answered Edetus. "How comes it to pass then," asked Panurge, "that they are thus bescabbed, bescurfed, all embroidered o'er the phiz with carbuncles, pushes, and pockroyals, some of which undermine the handles of their faces?" "This same fashionable and illustrious disease," quoth Edetus, "is common among that kind of birds, because they are pretty apt to be tossed on the salt deep." He then acquainted us with the occasion of their coming. "This next to us," said he, "looks so wistfully upon you to see whether he may not find among your company a stately gaudy kind of huge dreadful birds of prey, which yet are so untoward that they ne'er could be brought to the lure nor to perch on the glove. They tell us that there are such in your world, and that some of them have goodly garters below the knee with an inscription about them which condemns him, qui mal y pense, who shall think ill of it to be bewrayed and conskited. Others are said to wear the devil in a string before their paunches, and others a ram's skin." "All that's true enough, good Master Edetus," quoth Panurge, "but we have not the honor to be acquainted with their knightships." "Come on," cried Edetus in a merry mood, "we have had chat enough o' conscience. Let's e'en go drink." "And eat," quoth Panurge. "Eat," replied Edetus, "and drink bravely, old boy. Twist like plowjobbers and swill like tinkers. Pull away and save tide, for nothing is so dear and precious as time. Therefore we will be sure to put it to a good use. He would fain have carried us first to bathe in the bagnios of the Carden Hawks, which are goodly delicious places, and have us licked over with precious ointments by the Allips, alias rubbers, as soon as we should come out of the bath. But Pantagruel told him that he could drink, but too much without that. He then led us into a spacious delicate refectory, or freightory room, and told us, "Braguibus the hermit made you fast 4 days together. Now, contrariwise, I'll make you eat and drink of the best 4 days through stitch before you budge from this place." "But hark ye me," cried Panurge, "may not we take a nap in the meantime?" "Aye, aye," answered Edetus, "that is as you shall think good, for he that sleeps drinks." Good Lord! How we lived! What good bub! What dainty cheer! Oh, what a honest cod was this same Edetus! Chapter 5.6 How the Birds Are Crammed in the Ringing Island. Pantagruel looked I don't know howish, and seemed not very well pleased with the 4 days' junketing which Edetus enjoined us. Edetus, who soon found it out, said to him, "You know, sir, that 7 days before winter, and 7 days after, there is no storm at sea. For then the elements are still out of respect for the halcyons, or kingfishers, birds sacred to Thetis, which then lay their eggs and hatch their young near the shore. Now here the sea makes itself amends for this long calm, and whenever any foreigners come hither, it grows boisterous and stormy for 4 days together. We can give no other reason for it, but that it is a piece of its civility, that those who come among us may stay whether they will or no, and be copiously feasted all the while with the incomes of the ringing. Therefore pray don't think your time lost, for willing, nilling, you'll be forced to stay, unless you are resolved to encounter Juno, Neptune, Doris Aeolus, and his flusterbusters, and, in short, all the pack of ill-natured left-handed godlings and vejoves. Do but resolve to be cheery, and fall to briskly." After we had pretty well stayed our stomachs with some tight snatches, Friar John said to Edetus, "For aught I see, you have none but a parcel of birds in cages in this island of yours, and the devil a bit of one of them all that sets his hand to the plough, or tills the land whose fat he devours. Their whole business is to be frolic, to chirp it, to whistle it, to warble it, tossing it, and roar it merrily night and day. Pray then, if I may be so bold, Whence comes this plenty and overflowing of all dainty bits and good things which we see among you? From all the other world returned Editus, if you accept some part of the northern regions, who of late years have stirred up the jakes. Mum, they may chance ere long to rue the day they did so. Their cows shall have porridge, and their dogs oats. There will be work made among them, that there will. Come, a fig fort, let's drink. But pray what countrymen are you? Turin is our country, answered Panurge. Cod so, cried Editus, you were not then hatched of an ill bird. I will say that for you, since the blessed Turin is your mother. For from thence there comes hither every year such a vast store of good things, that we were told by some folks of the place that happened to touch at this island, that your Duke of Turin's income will not afford him to eat his belly full of beans and bacon, a good dish spoiled between Moses and Pythagoras, because his predecessors have been more than liberal to these most holy birds of ours, that we might here munch it, twist it, cram it, gorge it, craw it, riot it, junket it, and tickle it off. Stuffing our puddings with dainty pheasants, partridges, pullets with eggs, fat capons of Laugenois, and all sorts of venison and wild fowl. Come, box it about, tope on, my friends. Pray do you see yon jolly birds that are perched together? How fat, how plump, and in good case they look, with the income that Turin yields us. And in faith they sing rarely for their good founders, that is the truth on't. You never saw any Arcadian birds mumble more fairly than they do over a dish when they see these two gilt batons, or when I ring for them, those great bells that you see above their cages. Drink on, sirs, whip it away. Verily, friends, 'tis very fine drinking today, and so 'tis every day o' the week. Then drink on, toss it about, here's to you with all my soul. You are most heartily welcome. Never spare it, I pray you. Fear not we should ever want good bub and bella timber. For look here, though the sky were of brass, and the earth of iron, we should not want wherewithal to stuff the gut, though they were to continue so 7 or 8 years longer than the famine in Egypt. Let us then, with brotherly love and charity, refresh ourselves here with the creature. Wounds, man, cried Panurge, what a rare time you have on't in this world. Pshaw, returned Editus, this is nothing to what we shall have in t'other. The Elysian fields will be the least that can fall to our lot. Come, in the meantime let us drink here. Come, here's to thee, old Fuddlecap. Your first citizens, said I, were superlatively wise in devising thus a means for you to compass whatever all men naturally covet so much. And so few, or, to speak more properly, none can enjoy together, I mean, a paradise in this life and another in the next. Sure you were born wrapped in your mother's smickets. Oh, happy creatures! Oh, more than men! Would I had the luck to fare like you. Motteux inserts Chapter 16. After Chapter 6. Chapter 5.7. How Panurge related to Master Editus the fable of the horse and the ass. When we had crammed and crammed again, Editus took us into a chamber that was well furnished, hung with tapestry, and finely gilt. Thither he caused to be brought store of myrabolans, cashew, green ginger preserved, with plenty of hippocras and delicious wine. With those antidotes, that were like a sweet lethe, he invited us to forget the hardships of our voyage, and at the same time he sent plenty of provisions on board our ship that rid in the harbor. After this, we e'en jogged to bed for that night. But the devil a bit poor Pilgarlic could sleep one wink the everlasting jingle-jangle of the bells kept me awake whether I would or no. About midnight Editus came to wake us that we might drink. He himself showed us the way, saying, You men of t'other world say that ignorance is the mother of all evil, and so far you are right. Yet for all that you do not take the least care to get rid of it, but still plod on, and live in it, with it, and by it, for which a plaguy deal of mischief lights on you every day, and you are right enough served you are perpetually ailing somewhat, making a moan, and never right. It is what I was ruminating upon just now. And, indeed, ignorance keeps you here fastened in bed, just as that bullyrock Mars was detained by Vulcan's art. For all the while you do not mind that you ought to spare some of your rest, and be as lavish as you can of the goods of this famous island. Come, come, you should have eaten 3 breakfasts already, and take this from me for a certain truth, that if you would consume the mouth ammunition of this island, you must rise betimes. Eat them, they multiply; spare them, they diminish. For example, mow a field in due season, and the grass will grow thicker and better. Don't mow it, and in a short time, 'twill be floored with moss. Let's drink and drink again, my friends, come, let's all carouse it. The leanest of our birds are now singing to us all, we'll drink to them, if you please. Let's take off 1, 2, 3, 9 bumpers. Non-zealous, said Caritas. When day, peeping in the east, made the sky turn from black to red like a boiling lobster, he waked us again to take a dish of monastical brewies. From that time we made but one meal that only lasted the whole day, so that I cannot well tell how I may call it, whether dinner, supper, nuncheon, or after supper. Only, to get a stomach, we took a turn or two in the island, to see and hear the blessed singing birds. At night Panurge said to Eadicus, Give me leave, sweet sir, to tell you a merry story of something that happened some 23 moons ago in the country of Chasselarod. One day in April, a certain gentleman's groom, Roger by name, was walking his master's horses in some fallow ground. There 'twas his good fortune to find a pretty shepherdess feeding her bleating sheep and harmless lambkins on the brow of a neighboring mountain, in the shade of an adjacent grove. Near her, some frisking kids tripped it over a green carpet of nature's own spreading. And to complete the landscape, there stood an ass. Roger, who was a wag, had a dish of chat with her, and after some ifs, ands, and buts, hems and highs on her side, got her in the mind to get up behind him, to go and see his stable, and there take a bit by the by in a civil way. While they were holding a parley, the horse, directing his discourse to the ass, for all brute beasts spoke that year in divers places, whispered these words in his ear, Poor ass, how I pity thee. Thou slavest like any hack, I read it on thy crupper. Thou dost well, however, since God has created thee to serve mankind. Thou art a very honest ass, but not to be better rubbed down, curricombed, trapped, and fed than thou art, seems to me indeed to be too hard a lot. Alas! Thou art all rough-coated, in ill plight, jaded, foundered, crestfallen, and drooping, like a mooting duck, and feedest here on nothing but coarse grass, or briars and thistles. Therefore do but pace it along with me, and thou shalt see how we noble steeds, made by nature for war, are treated. Come, thou'lt lose nothing by coming, I'll get thee a taste of my fare. I troth, sir, I can but love you and thank you, returned the ass. I'll wait on you, good Mr. Steed. Methinks, Gaffer Ass, you might as well have said Sir Grandpa Steed. Oh! Cry mercy, good Sir Grandpa, returned the ass. We country clowns are somewhat gross, and apt to knock words out of joint. However, an't please you, I will come after your worship at some distance, lest for taking this run my side should chance to be firked and curried with a vengeance. As it is but too often, the more is my sorrow. The shepherdess being got behind Roger, the ass followed, fully resolved to bait like a prince with Roger's steed. But when they got to the stable, the groom, who spied the grave animal, ordered one of his underlings to welcome him with a pitchfork and curricomb him with a cudgel. The ass, who heard this, recommended himself mentally to the god Neptune, and was packing off, thinking and syllogizing within himself thus. Had not I been an ass, I had not come here among great lords, when I must needs be sensible that I was only made for the use of the small vulgar. Aesop had given me a fair warning of this in one of his fables. Well, I must e'en scamper or take what follows. With this he fell a-trotting, and wincing and yerking and calcitrating, alias kicking and farting and funking, and curveting and bounding and springing, and galloping full drive, as if the devil had come for him in propria persona. The shepherdess, who saw her ass scour off, told Roger that it was her cattle, and desired he might be kindly used, or else she would not stir her foot over the threshold. Friend Roger no sooner knew this, but he ordered him to be fetched in, and that my master's horses should rather chop straw for a week together than my mistress's beast should want his belly full of corn. The most difficult point was to get him back, for in vain the youngsters complimented and coaxed him to come. I dare not, said the ass, I am bashful. And the more they strove by fair means to bring him with them, the more the stubborn thing was untoward and flew out at the heels, insomuch that they might have been there to this hour, had not his mistress advised them to toss Oates in a sieve or in a blanket and call him, which was done, and made him wheel about and say, Oates, with a witness. Oates shall go to pot. Adveniat, Oates will do, there's evidence in the case, but none of the rubbing down, none of the firking. Thus melodiously singing, for, As you know, that Arcadian bird's note is very harmonious. He came to the young gentleman of the horse, alias Blackgarb, who brought him to the stable. When he was there, they placed him next to the great horse his friend, rubbed him down, curricombed him, laid clean straw under him up to the chin, and there he lay at rack and manger, the first stuffed with sweet hay, the latter with oats, which when the horse's valadier chamber sifted, he clapped down his lugs, to tell them by signs that he could eat it but too well without sifting, and that he did not deserve so great an honor. When they had well fed, quoth the horse to the ass, Well, poor ass, how is it with thee now? How dost thou like this fare? Thou wert so nice at first, a body had much ado to get thee hither. By the fig, answered the ass, which one of our ancestors eating, Philemon died laughing, this is all sheer ambrosia, good Sir Grandpa, but what would you have an ass say? Methinks all this is yet but half cheer. Don't your worships hear now, and then use to take a leap. What leaping dost thou mean? Ask the horse, the devil leap thee. Dost thou take me for an ass? In troth, Sir Grandpa, quoth the ass, I am somewhat of a blockhead, you know, and cannot, for the heart's blood of me, learn so fast the court way of speaking of you gentlemen horses. I mean, don't you stallionize it sometimes here among your mettled fillies? Tush, whispered the horse, speak lower. For, by Bucephalus, if the grooms but hear thee they will maul and belam thee thrice and threefold, so that thou wilt have but little stomach to a leaping bout. Cod so, man, we dare not so much as grow stiff at the tip of the lowermost snout, though it were but to leak or so, for fear of being jerked and paid out of our lechery. As for anything else, we are as happy as our master, and perhaps more. By this pack-saddle, my old acquaintance, quoth the ass, I have done with you, a fart for thy litter and hay, and a fart for thy oats. Give me the thistles of our fields, since there we leap when we list. Eat less and leap more, I say. It is meat, drink, and cloth to us. Ah! Friend Grandpa, it would do thy heart good to see us at a fair, when we hold our provincial chapter. Oh! How we leap it, while our mistresses are selling their goslings and other poultry. With this they parted. Dixie, I have done. Panurge then held his peace. Pantagruel would have had him to have gone on to the end of the chapter. But Editus said, A word to the wise is enough. I can pick out the meaning of that fable, and know who is that ass and who the horse. But you are a bashful youth, I perceive. Well, know that there's nothing for you here. Scatter no words. Yet, returned Panurge, I saw, but even now, a pretty kind of a cooing abiscite as white as a dove, and her I had rather ride than lead. May I never stir if she is not a dainty bit, and very well worth a sin or two. Heaven forgive me. I meant no more harm in it than you. May the harm I meant in it befall me presently.